You're tuned in to RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
4 seconds left. In front. Happy moment. The Tampa Bay Lightning have won the first Stanley Cup. And the Tampa Bay Lightning have won the Stanley Cup. Lightning strikes twice. The Tampa Bay Lightning win their second straight Stanley Cup.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to RBLR Lightning. My name is Jake Ricker. Alongside me is my good friend and co-host, Matt Cannon. Matt, we have a lot to talk about here in this off-season episode. A lot has been going on. How you doing today, my friend?
I'm quite well. Yeah, we've had a pretty busy offseason so far for it being hardly into it so far. Yeah, I guess we do have a lot to cover. We got some big names, big signings, big trades.
The craziness of when you make it to the Stanley Cup Finals, and the offseason is 10 times shorter. And next thing you know, we're already looking ahead and getting ready for next season. So let's start off with the oldest news at this point, and that was our first off-season re-signing. And it was none other than Nick Paul, who is coming back to the Tampa Bay Lightning. He signed a 7-year extension. Yes, you heard me right, a 7-year extension at $3.15 million per year. So quite a big contract for Nick Paul. Matt, your thoughts on this signing?
Initially, when I saw it, I was jumping for joy. You know, it's amazing. I'm happy to have him back for quite a long time. And then, you look at it, 7 years might be a little too long. I think it puts him at age 33 or 34.
30, yeah,
But
33,
no,
I think it is.
okay. No, I am very excited. I'm happy to have him here, and I know he's also, ecstatic to be back with the Bolts for at least or for at most 7 years. So. It may be a little longer than we have all wanted, but at the same time, I mean, if he can play, most of these years like he did in this short amount of time with us, I think we're in for a good run with him. And 3.15, it's really not all that much, especially with a rising cap coming up. I'm calling it quite the bargain because on the open market, he probably would have gotten north of 4 or 4.5.
Yeah, absolutely. That excuse me, that's the key thing to remember, right? Open market, he's probably for maybe even $5 million. Some teams overpaying for him, but I think you're absolutely right. 7 years, it's long. That's a long contract for a guy like Nick Paul, but he probably definitely took a pay cut to get those 7 years. And 3.15 really isn't that bad. It is a lot for a team like us who's up against the cap, which we'll get into how much cap space we'll have here in just a minute. But I like how much the cap hit that we have for him. And 7 years is not the worst thing in the world. 33 is honestly, it's older, but it's not super old for a lot of players. Players now these days are playing into their 40s all the time. So
yeah, we're grabbing his prime years.
Right. And just as you said, if he plays anything like he did for the little time that we had him, if that's anything to show what's to come, I mean, it's going to be a fantastic deal. I mean, he was by far one of the best players in the Lightning this postseason. So if he can even do 50% of that, he would be excellent. So I'm not concerned about this signing at all. I'm happy Nick Paul is back. He's a very hard worker. He had nothing but good things to say about the city and the team. If you guys were able to listen to his press conference, he was basically saying, I love the energy in this city. He loved how many people always coming up to him, wishing him good luck or congratulating him on the Bolts run, which is just so nice to see that the Jeff Vinik and the Lightning have created such a fantastic organization here in Tampa, and the fans as well have done a great job at really putting us into this, higher tier of hockey organizations. So it was really nice to hear Nick Paul saying all those nice things. And he's here to stay for 7 more years, which is fantastic.
And the way that the contract works out, it's not front or back loaded or anything. It is 3.15 throughout all 7 years. And in the 25-26 season, he does have a 16-team no-trade list that will come into effect the start of that season. So
I
You
believe
know,
for the first couple of years, it's a full no trade clause, correct? If I remember
I thought
correctly.
it was nothing. I could be wrong, so please tell me if I am. I thought it was no trade clause until, or like no trade clause until 25, 26, but I could be wrong.
I have to double check the statistics here, but I thought JBB loves to give out those no trade clauses
It
all the
helps.
time. Yeah, it helps keep the players there, and it helps them to probably take a hit as well. They're probably willing to take
Yeah.
less money if they know they have a extended, a better chance of staying in one place because guys don't like to
Hmm.
move. So yeah, looking at it here, so years 1 through 4, full no trade clause. Years 5 through 7, it's a modified no trade clause to 16
Okay.
teams, which actually is better because 1 for 4, it gives the Lightning more of an option to move him. It makes it easier to move him
Hmm.
in years 5 through 7 if they want to. So I
Yeah.
think that's actually pretty good. But before we get into cap space, and speaking of no trade clauses, actually, we need to talk about a trade that happened. Let's call it as it is. It was a bummer. Unfortunately, in this salary cap world, the Lightning cannot be like those old Oilers teams back in the 80s and keeping buddy. You have to lose some players. And unfortunately for the Lightning this year, it was Ryan McDonagh. There were rumors that he was going to be moved earlier on, that they were working with some teams and working with McDonagh to see where they could trade him. They did a couple of days ago. McDonagh was traded to the Nashville Predators in exchange for Felipe Myers and Grant Mishosh. Again, I apologize if I mispronounced anybody's last name there, but so Ryan McDonagh on the move to the Nashville Predators. And I'll start, and then I'll get your thoughts here, Matt, on the trade. First of all, thank you to Ryan McDonagh for all that he did with the Lightning organization. It felt like he was here forever. It's actually only like 4 years, which is a lot shorter than you might think, but he was huge for the Lightning in winning the 2 back-to-back Stanley Cups. He was a world-class player on and off the ice, so wish him nothing but the best in Nashville. And this was purely a cap move, is what this really was. We'll get into the nitty and gritty and the trade details of this, but the Lightning had to find some cap somewhere. And I know a lot of people were wondering, well, what about Killorn? But McDonagh at $6.75 million freed up the Lightning the most cap and gave them the most flexibility. So it had to unfortunately be him. And also as a factor of McDonagh waive, he had a full no trade clause, so he did not have to go to Nashville if he did not want to. So he helped the team all the way up in making this trade. That's really unfortunate we're losing him. We'll have to talk about the defensive core heading into next season because I think it's the Lightning's biggest question mark as of right now with out. But unfortunate to see him go, but it had to be done because it gives the Lightning a lot more cap space.
You said it best. I mean, this one, it was a bummer, but I think everybody understands that this one just had to happen. Making 6.25 mil or whatever he was. I mean,
6.75, yeah.
7.5. So yeah, even more. So almost $7 million. I mean, it had to happen, and not that you really felt it coming, but there were some major budget cuts coming, and unfortunately, McDonagh just was a victim of it. But again, thank you to Ryan. I mean, he was nothing short of fantastic every single game. I remember back in 2018, I was still a relatively new fan, and I just remember getting the trade notification in school one day, and I was just jumping for joy. I had to leave class because it was just monumental for me. It was beautiful, but again, 4 years of hard service and hard playing from him. I wish him the best of luck in Nashville, but again, this strictly was a cap dump. We're going to have a lot more money to re-sign some of our free agents and maybe some fresh faces on the market. Who knows? But again, it had to be done. And again, yeah, McDonagh, he did not have to go anywhere. I know he didn't want to, but he's a smart enough guy to know that this is a business. He respects our team enough to say, you know what, I'll give you guys the tools so you can stay competitive. So, major props to him for that.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% right there. Going into the trade details here. So the Lightning did get 2 players in this deal, as I mentioned earlier. Grant Mishmash, I believe is how you say his last name.
Mismash?
It's M-I, it's literally miss and then mash. Mismash is how it's written. I don't know if that's how you actually pronounce it, but he's a minor league player. He, one of those guys that was drafted in the late rounds, could turn into something, who knows, but more than likely he's just going to be playing in the AHL. He only has a 1 year left on his deal, so who sticks around, but that was more of just kind of a roster transaction kind of thing, I think.
I wouldn't expect him to see him in Bolts Blue.
Yeah, unlikely, unless, hey, a welcome surprise, but a surprise of him maybe exploding in the AHL, but more than likely he won't see any time up here in the NHL. But the bigger player of interest here is Myers. Myers is 25 years old. He's a right-handed defenseman. He's a cap hit of about, I think it's 2.55 million. And there's a lot of interesting things that come with him. So he's a defenseman. He was projected to have a lot of good potential, but it seems like he hit that ceiling yet. He has 4 years of NHL experience. But the other thing is, if the Lightning wanted to buy Myers out, they would actually create even more space this year because of a cap credit thing. And if you want to get more how that all works, I recommend going to Cap Friendly and going to their Twitter page, because they explain all of that stuff better than I ever could. But basically, if the Lightning were to buy out Myers, they would obviously get the 2.5 million cap space. His contract comes off the books, but they would also get I think it's like a $630,000 cap credit. So really, they would get another 3 million ish, about 3 million in cap space by buying him out. Now they would lose about 600,000 next year, but JBB in his press conference after this trade that they do not plan to buy him out. Tells me as well, at 2.5 million, that's not a guy you're going to send down the AHL or scratch. At that kind of contract, you're going to play him. So he's a very tall, big-bodied defenseman. I don't know too much about him because I didn't watch a ton of Predators games, but it's going to be interesting to see if he performs here in Tampa with this new coaching staff and this new team, because I think he's got the potential to be a solid bottom six defenseman or even middle six with the line, but it have to only wait and see and how he performs, because he's when you look at his stats, he is not the best defenseman, but that change of scenery could help a lot. So it's going to be he's a player to have your eye on this season for sure.
I asked some of my Flyers friends, like, what can I expect with him? He was only in Nashville for a quick cup of coffee. So,
right.
What they said to me is that, he has a lot, if not all of the tools to really become a solid NHL defenseman, but just it's, one game he's got one thing going and the next he doesn't. He just needs to figure out a way to put everything together. From what I have heard and from what I've seen, is his best skill is his skating. He is a big guy. He's 6'4", like 200 pounds or something.
Yeah.
And but he's got exceptional skating, not necessarily speed, but like fluidity with it. He has exceptional acceleration. Again, speed's not his thing, but his acceleration's pretty good. He can kind of get himself back into the play, and he does those fancy mohawk pushes, if you know what I'm talking about. It's really kind of skill skating. So that's his biggest attribute. He's got a pretty good shot, but really where his downside is, from what I hear from them, is that sometimes his hockey IQ isn't always there, and his decision making is kind of hit or miss, and mostly miss. But again, he's a younger guy, and Philadelphia, they've had some pretty lean years there, so they're not necessarily known for being quite the defense factory. So
That's true.
Yeah, I mean,
he's playing in a much better situation now, is the simple way to put it.
Absolutely. So, we every year, more than once a year, a player gets traded to a different market, and in a new system, they flourish. So I'm not saying he's going to be the next Ryan McDonagh or even a Mikhail Sergachev, but he could be a serviceable defenseman. It could be kind of a diamond in the rough situation. So I'm hoping and I'm cheering for Phil Myers. Hopefully he can make quite the impact on this team, positive impact for that matter, but I guess we will have to wait and see.
They joked on the 31 Thoughts podcast that he is going to be the Norris Trophy winner in 2025. So who knows? Maybe he will be, but definitely a player to keep your eye on for sure. I fully expect to see him in the lineup, especially with that kind of cap hit, if they're actually are going to keep him and they don't buy him out. So as for the cap space for this deal, we mentioned this was a cap clearing move. So as of right now, the Lightning on cap friendly, they're $933,000 over the cap, but that also includes ABB, who will likely not be on the roster, more likely be back in the AHL again, unless they decide to use him. I don't know.
And is Seabrook? He's still on LTIR, right?
So that's what
still.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll let you finish. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. But you're right. So that's what I'm going to get to. So technically, without ABB, the Lightning would be $175,000 over the cap. But the reason they're over is because LTIR doesn't show when you're in the off season. But once LTIR kicks in and the season starts, as Matt mentioned, Seabrook still on LTIR and would give the Lightning about $6.7 million cap space, give or take there. So that is the cap they have left to play with. They have to re-sign Andre Palat and Jan Ruda. Riley Nash is also an unrestricted free agent. I don't know if they're going to bring him back or not. He was pretty decent for the Lightning in the postseason, so they could back on a cheap deal. But Palat and Ruda are the two big ones, and they're currently working with both their agents to get done. JBB did, real quick before I get to Palat, Myers also only 1 year left on his deal. So I guess very low risk for the Lightning there. If it doesn't work out with Myers, they can let him go or sign him to a really cheap contract, depending on what happens. But for Palat, he is the next one I think the Lightning are focused on right now. He's probably the bigger name out of the two. And JBB said they're working on it. It's a tough deal to work out though, and that's largely probably because JBB is trying to keep that deal as low as possible to make sure he can get everybody back. And then, as you mentioned, maybe sign some free agency. And Palat, I'm sure, wants to cash in right now as he his best season and is looking to secure some money. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of negotiation going back and forth. I don't know what the heck he's going to sign for, but I don't think it'll be too long to know what the contract is.
Yeah, as far as Palat and Ruda, I'd really love to see both of them back, but I can't quite remember if I said this on the last show or I said on the Lightning Rod, but Jan Ruda really impressed me throughout the
You did mention it last time.
I did? Okay, so I'd be really excited, and I think he's honestly kind of a hidden gem as well. I can't imagine come free agency, many teams are really going to be throwing around major offers that he couldn't refuse, where it's like, he will be taking middle to top 4 minutes with Lightning. I think he's really impressed John Cooper, especially pairing him with his best defenseman. And again, he's emulated a lot from Victor Hedman. So I think that deal it will get done at some point. But yes, the biggest one is Palat. With this one, I know getting rid of McDonagh was part of the reason they want to re-sign Palat, so get rid of McDonagh. So
right.
I'm not gonna speculate anything because again, he can't. If they don't get this deal done by free agency, it truly is kind of a coin flip. Yeah, so it's looking not worse every day, but I don't see it.
This is going to take some because like I said, Palat's trying to probably cash in, and JBB's trying to keep that deal low. So they're going to have to find that middle ground. The one thing that's interesting to me about Ruda is because of Myers, the Lightning could let Ruda walk. And they would still have 6 defensemen. As you mentioned, though, I do think Ruda was really solid, especially this year. So I don't think I'd like to see that. And it would give the Lightning more flexibility of who they want to throw in there. And if it goes 7 defensemen, they could. So I expect them to re-sign Ruda. But if they wanted to just let him go, it is an option for them now that Myers is here. So a couple of things to look out for. And then as for free agency, it's really hard to say because a lot of that depends on what happens with Palat and Ruda. Obviously, if one of those guys doesn't sign, you have a lot more cap space to work with in free agency. You may pick up a few new guys. If they both sign, you'll likely have very little to work with in free agency because Palat's going to take up that more million and they'll have practically nothing again. So, but that'll be a show for another time as we get closer to free agency. We can look into that. Matt, anything else to add on these contracts before we look into the draft here?
Not necessarily anything about them, but I do want to wonder, do you think we do have any more offseason trades coming up? Do you think Killorn stays? That's really the biggest name.
Yeah, I know he gets brought up all the time. I don't see him going anywhere, honestly. I think if they were going to move Killorn, it would have been now before McDonagh. Like maybe try and work that out. But I think McDonagh was the bigger cap hit, so that's why he ended up gets moving. But I'm pretty sure Killorn mentioned a while ago too on the Spit and Chicklets podcast. He's like, I'm not leaving. He's like, if I get traded, I'm retiring. So I know he wants to stay here. But yeah, I think he'll stay.
He was talking with them about the expansion draft, and
that's right. He was like, "You better protect me."
It was either him or Yanni Gord. And he was just praying that it wasn't him that got picked because here long almost anybody else on the, and he says, "Dude, I just want to retire here." So
as long as he doesn't read it in the postseason, then we're good. And he did not in the postseason. But he is a solid player overall. So, but
he had a great regular season too. I think he gets so overshadowed by that postseason. Yeah, and he was in a completely different role in the playoffs than he was in the regular season. He was on that shutdown pair that couldn't score to save their life, but that's not what they were really out there for. He had almost, he had like 56 points in the regular season and 26 goals. Like, I mean, I'd be happy to keep Killorn, honestly. And I know a lot of them were calling for his head, but one bad playoff doesn't mean you're a bad player.
He has been bait target for like 4 years now. It's always been his name that's one brought up, but he has. I
don't believe it till I see it.
Right. It's possible they could move him and then sign somebody if they wanted to. I don't think that would be a bad move necessarily, but unlikely. To answer your question, though, I think we're done with the moves. I think now it's re-signing Palat, re-signing Ruda if you have leftover cap, or having to replace one of those guys going into free agency. I think that's for the Lightning. I will mention I think it was on the 31 podcast.
32, by the way.
32. That's right.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. I'm in scramble mode, so I can't remember how many teams are in this league. But yeah, 32 thoughts. I believe it was on that podcast as well. They mentioned the situation of this McDonagh trade. I can't remember who said it. I think, Matt, you remember. You'll have to remember.
Nick Kyprios.
Yeah. So he was saying that the way this played out is basically the Lightning had a deal in place with Columbus. If McDonagh did not waive his no trade clause for one of these two teams that they had picked out, one of them being Nashville, they were going to put him on waivers and Columbus would take him. And the way it was said on the podcast, you have to go listen to the clip online if you want to hear it. But they kind of made it sound where JBB basically went to McDonagh and said, listen, you can either pick one of these two teams or I'm sending you to Columbus. And it kind of made the Lightning look like a little bit. But I don't think that's how that happened at all. JBB even mentioned in his press conference that he did not want to trade Ryan McDonagh, and it was literally only because of the cap he had to do it, and he hated doing it. So I guarantee you when they were talking about this, he was like, listen, I don't want to move you, but here are the two teams I have interested. If we can work this out, or maybe you could go to Columbus too, we can make that happen as well. It was the way they portrayed it on the podcast sounded a lot worse than I think it actually happened. But also the Columbus GM later came out and said that wasn't true at all. So who knows what actually happened. But I wanted to bring that up because I think it's being overblown a little bit by some other fans. I know Columbus fans were upset about it too because they're like, why does everybody hate Columbus so much?
Because you're in Ohio.
Right.
I've got my personal reasons as a fan of the Lightning, but everybody else.
Right. Exactly. So important to mention there. We know the Lightning are a world-class organization, so I would be shocked if that's the way they handled that situation.
If McDonagh did not want to go anywhere, he had every right and then some to say, no,
Absolutely.
I'm staying put. So
Absolutely. What makes him kind of even more of actually, the Bull Report put up a poll, and we said, does Ryan McDonagh belong in potential Ring of Honor for the Lightning? Like, not retired numbers, but Ring of Honor. And overwhelming majority said yes.
I'd say yes.
I think part of that is like what he did at the end there and waiving that no trade clause, because that's a very unselfish thing to do. But let's get into the draft, though, Matt. That's what's coming up tomorrow as of this recording. It's probably the day of when you're listening to this podcast. By the way, real quick, I want to thank everybody for listening. If you guys can take a second, sure to hit that subscribe button, give us that 5-star rating. You can. It really helps us out. We really appreciate it. And if you want to get some cool merch and also support the show, make sure you head over to our website. You can use code BOLTS for 10% off your order. But so speaking of the draft, the Lightning do have a first pick this. They're not going to have one for the next 2 years after this, but they do currently have a first-round pick. It's going to be the 31st pick of the draft. Of course, Colorado being number 32, as they are the Stanley Cup champions. And Matt, I want to get your thoughts on what you might do with this pick, because I want to go over some of the players that we are projected to take in some of these mock drafts, and I'll get into that in just a second. But I feel like there's a good chance that the Lightning end up trading out of the first round and not have picks in rounds 2 or 3. So for those that don't know, there's round 1 pick, no picks in rounds 2 or 3, picks in 4 and 5, and 2 picks in 6 and 7. So Matt, your thoughts though on the Lightning potentially trading out of the first round to get some second and third round picks?
If recent history would tell us anything, it's that the Lightning do not care about their first round picks, rightfully so. So I'm not sure. I really would be surprised if we actually kept it and drafted 31st. So personally, again, I'm not going to speculate because I'm not smart enough to do that. I can't see them sticking with this pick. It could be a draft day trade, which is looking like what it's going to be, given that it's tomorrow?
Tomorrow, yes.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, again, I'll be surprised if they actually end up using it, but we all know that the Lightning, they can't really draft in the first round anyway. And first pick, that's really really a second round pick at that point. But I'm not sure if they do trade for picks, or I can't really see them gaining a player worth note with that 31st overall pick, somebody that could, again, maybe replace McDonagh or somewhere in the bottom 6. I don't really see that happening. So, no, I think you got it right. It could be just kind of trading it for like a second and a third round pick, maybe. Again, I'm terrible at draft day speculation kind of thing. So you're gonna be my biggest resource here, Jake.
Yeah, well, listen, I'm not any as much better as you are. It's a very tough thing to predict. You never know what these guys,
the bar's low,
are gonna do. So, and by the way, our last first round draft pick was in 2019, and it was Nolan Fouille drafted, and the last first round pick was in 2017, and it was Cal Foote. The Lightning, the last 2 first round picks were both of the Foote brothers, which I find pretty interesting. Nolan Foote, of course, no longer on the team, as he was traded earlier on. Cal Foote still trying to fully crack that roster there as well. So let's take a look at guys that they are projected to potentially draft. I went on and I just Googled NHL mock drafts, and I took a bunch of websites. Here are some of the guys the Lightning are projected to take. A lot of these guys are centers. It seems the consensus among these analysts is that the Lightning are going to take a center, which surprises me, because according to Cap Friendly, they have 17 different that can play center, 14 players play right wing, 19 that can play left wing, 10 right defensemen, and 5 left defensemen. So left left defenseman seems like the biggest need for the Lightning, but a lot of people think they're going to go center. And by the way, it's also hard to see what position they have the least of at this point, because it used to you played either center, right wing, or left wing, but nowadays guys will play any position, or just forward. In reality, like Steve plays all three positions. So that's why those numbers are so high there. But the player that was on there, he was on two different mock drafts for the Lightning. This is going to be a really hard name to pronounce. Ready for this one? Luca Del Bel Boulez. I believe is how you pronounce it. Yeah, he's been on there a couple of times. He's 18 years old, center position. He has scored 30 goals, 46 assists for 76 points last season. He's projected to go. I've seen him in one at like the 15th position, but for the most part, either late first or early second is where he's projected to go. Seems like a good center. He actually used to play soccer before he started playing hockey. He mentioned one of his strengths is endurance from, playing soccer so much. He has to be on the field basically the whole time, that it's helped him with hockey and his endurance. So not a bad pick at all. I think it wouldn't be a bad choice for the Lightning, but he is the guy I've seen the most in the first round. Matt, any thoughts on this guy?
If I had any, I'd give him. But again, I'm not big on the whole, just because I've got no reason to be over the last 4 years. So I have not done my draft homework, but I have seen his name floating around. And yes, I have seen him projected to go a little bit higher in the draft. Like I don't know about like 15ish, but like low to mid 20s. But
there was one draft that had him at 15, which surprised me. But with these mock drafts are all over the place.
I don't know. I mean, he could be a serviceable player, and you know what? If we end up keeping this pick and landing him at 31, I could see him being a potential low key steal. Even if that name is going to be hellacious to pronounce. But, yes. This is all just kind of hypothetical. So if we do end up picking up, we won't see him for a couple of years or so.
Right. Selfishly, I hope the Lightning do draft in the first round just because I think it's more exciting. And I've been doing research on it, but they'll probably trade this first round pick. But even if they do trade into the second round, they could still get this guy. At the second round pick, depending on what pick they trade for. So that is something to keep in mind as well. Eureka, our producer in the back here, also mentions that the older, quote unquote, older center prospect. So that could be a reason why they're going for a center position here, which is a good point. But I'll just list off a couple of names real quick of some of the other that I've seen going to us in mock drafts, and then I'm going to give you, Matt, what I want them to do if they do a first round pick. So a couple of the other players is Denton Matynchuk, 13 goals, 51 assists, 61 points. Another center position, 17 years old, very good playmaker, kind of similar to Boulez as well. Although Boulez is a little more of a goal scorer, and that it seems like. Then we also have an 18-year-old center, Juri Kulich. Again, I apologize if I mispronounce these names. 9 goals, 5 assists, 15 points last season. He's more of a bigger type of center, not super offensive. I've also seen Philip Messer. He's a right winger, 18 years old, 8 goals, 8 assists for 16 points. The other two big ones of note here are probably going to be Nathan Goucher, 31 goals, 26 assists, 57 points. Matt, I see you laughing. Pronounce these names, okay?
Say it with a little bit of confidence, Jay.
It's hard. All right.
I can imagine.
All right, I'll give you this one for confidence. The next one is Gleb Trizov. I couldn't even do it. Trikazov. There's no way that's right. But he's 23 goals, 22 assists, and 45 points. He's just a forward because he's basically every position, kind of like Stamkos. I don't know a ton about these guys. If you want to get more information on them, I highly recommend going and checking out all these fantastic draft channels that do all research all season long to getting more information on them. But any of them would probably be a solid choice for the Lightning. What I want to see is the Lightning go for a left-handed defenseman. As I mentioned earlier, Lightning only have 5 players that can play on that left-handed position, and obviously 3 of them are already up in the NHL level. So I think that is their weakest point when you're looking at the entire roster as a whole, especially now with McDonagh gone. You don't have many left-handed defensemen. The 2 that I think the Lightning could go for, I'm going to be able to pronounce this one because it's American, so I know it's the best. But Lane Hudson is probably my number 1 pick. He's 18 years old. He had 10 goals, 53 assists for 63 points last season. He also had a plus 59 rating. Which I know plus minus isn't everybody's favorite stat, but plus 59 is impressive.
Mm-hmm. The thing about plus minus is if it's like, kind of low numbers, it could be anything, but when it's extreme highs or extreme lows, it's very telling.
Right. He's projected to go a little higher than where the Lightning sit at 29. So I think he's probably going to go before us, but if he falls to the Lightning, I would love to see the Bolts pick him up. Everything I've heard is really good on him. He's a really good defender. He's kind of like a Mikhail Sergachev a bit, where he's got a really good offensive ability, but also has a solid defensive play as well. So Lane Hudson is probably my number 1 pick, but again, he's to go a little higher than the Lightning have. So we'll see how that plays out. The other guy, left-handed defenseman that I liked was Michael Buchinger. He had 5 goals, 39 assists for 44 points. He had a pretty average plus minus too, so that's why I included the one. But he's projected to go a little bit later than the Lightning have, so he's more likely going to be available. But either one of those guys, I think, are very solid picks at the left-handed defenseman position. I think it could really help out the Lightning here in the first round.
So again, if I could entertain some of these potential draft picks with you, I definitely would. But unfortunately, again, I didn't necessarily do my homework. So the people that you have listed, you have kind of picked out like positions where you think it could help out the Lightning now or in the future. Are you somebody who firmly believes in you draft for what you need, what you will need, or what you need right now? Or are you kind of a best player available kind of pick?
It's a good question. I would say I'm more of a position need type of person because, listen, you can draft the best player available, but if the best player available is a center, you have like 15 different centers, he's not going to play on your team for an extended period of time. Now, the argument back would be, well, if he's really good, you've got a great player on your team and you would hate to miss out on that, or you could even trade him for a lot. So I think really it should be a mix of both. And kind of saying like, okay, the 3 best players on the board right now are, player A, B, and C. A might be a little bit better than C, but C also fills a position of need. So maybe we go with C. That's usually where my head's at, but I do like to look at position of need the most, but it's a tough thing to decide. And I don't envy the scouts where they have to go in and figure that out. But I think most teams nowadays usually draft best player available for the most part.
So again, drafting 31st overall, I'm not super invested in it, but I have entertained some of the Montreal, New Jersey, Arizona, the top 3 picks, and everybody's saying Shane Wright. He's been the consensus over the last 3 years. He's going first overall, and he had kind of a not lackluster, he hasn't looked as spectacular as some of the other top prospects like Uri Slafkovsky or Logan Cooley and even Matt Savoy. So I want to get your thoughts. Do you think Montreal is going to stick with Shane Wright? Because I know the discourse about it has been as lively as ever. A lot of pegging Slafkovsky going overall.
If I'm a betting man, I'm betting on Shane Wright being the first overall draft pick. He's been the number 1 consensus for a while. Listen, guys have down years. I think he's still a very solid center. I believe Montreal does need center help as well, if I remember correctly. I haven't looked at their roster in a while. But now I will say this. You were asking about drafting at position of need or best player available. I think when you're in the top couple of picks, that's when you're really best player available, because those players could really make an immediate impact on your team. unless there's like a rare scenario. You have a team that desperately needs a goalie and could be a contender if they just got a goalie. Maybe then you go do something crazy. But I would go with Shane Wright. But as you mentioned, Matt, we're not scouts. We have no anything could happen. But my pick would be Shane Wright.
You know what? I'm going off the board. Lightning, they're drafting a goalie. They're keeping their pick and they're drafting a goalie. No.
I mean, you know what? The Lightning might be a pick for them in future rounds if they, like, let's say, trade out of the first round and maybe in the third round they go for a goalie, because the Lightning only have, as of right now, I think 3 goalies on the roster, in Vasilevsky, Elliott, and I believe it's Legacy.
Yes, Maxime Legacy.
Yeah, Legacy. Yeah. See, there you had that name.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at pronunciations. And then we also have Hugo Alnefelt as well, even though he showed up with a solid 690
one of them, I
save
think,
percentage.
is not signed yet, if I'm remembering correctly. I think one of their contracts is up.
So we actually did just place another one of our goalie prospects, Amir Miftakov, on unconditional waivers for the intention of buying out his contract. You know, it was a super, super low contract, kind of inconsequential, but he's going to go play back in Russia.
Right.
You know, it's very, very, very minor news, but I just figured I'd throw it out here while we're on the topic.
You're right. And the goal, so the Lightning do have, they have your 2 starters, and then as of right now, Alnefelt is the only one under contract. The other 2 have not signed yet. One is an RFA, one is a UFA. So depending on what happens with those guys, the Lightning could potentially draft a goalie. And hey, listen, if there's Andrei Vasilevsky sitting out there, you better take him, because we
better trade Kyle Quincy for him.
You can see how much of a difference a goaltender can make. But let us know too what you guys think in the comments, or let us know on Twitter at RBLR Sports. Who are the Lightning going to go pick in the first round? Are they going to keep that first round pick, or are we going to move out of it? Trade in the second and third round. Eureka says that we should just start Elliott and trade Andrei Vasilevsky for all the draft picks. So no, Eureka, I don't think that's a good idea. Oh boy. Listen, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody said that on Facebook already. Actually, somebody did. Somebody said that they should trade Andrei Vasilevsky, which no, that's all I have to say about that. Andrei Vasilevsky is a world-class goalie, and 90% of the reason we are even in the position we are in right now. So, but yeah, so I think that's about all we have. Next time we guys talk, we'll go over some of the draft picks that the Lightning made, and we'll start looking into the rest of the Lightning offseason. Hopefully we'll have some news on Palat and Ruda as well. But Matt, anything else to add before we show?
You know what? After this draft, I promise you guys I will do homework, seeing who we did select, and I'll have a little bit more to say about it. I promise you guys. I promise.
Listen, I don't blame you. Even looking up this stuff, I'm like, it's like looking at a foreign language. I'm like, I don't know what any of this means, and there's all statistics, and I may look like I may know what I'm talking about, but the reality is I have no clue.
See,
probably should not be saying that on the podcast right now. Everybody's like, why am I listening to RBLR right now?
We're just having a grand old time.
Yeah, but we will see what the Lightning are do. By the way, if the Lightning do pick one of the guys that I mentioned, I best believe I'm going to be talking about it next time. So if Lane Hudson is available, everybody cheer for Lane Hudson. That's
who I'm going for.
But thank you guys again so much for listening. Really do appreciate the support. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at RBLR Sports, so you don't miss out on this podcast and any other podcast that we have. We have a fantastic Rays podcast, Bucks podcast, the Bandits. We got it all Tampa Bay sports, all covered right here on the channel. We got some other fantastic people that the other teams. Just be sure to go check them out and give them a listen. So we will see you guys next week, and go Bolts.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.